First came Fangio, then Clark, then Senna, and then Schumacher. But the driver who has eclipsed them all as the statistical master of qualifying is Lewis Hamilton, the first person in the history of Formula One to make it to triple figures in pole positions.
It's a ton of poles for Lewis Hamilton in Formula One, the Spanish Grand Prix pole, his 100th in his Formula One career.
Hamilton's genius on a Sunday is more than matched by his talents on a Saturday. The British driver is, quite simply, one of the most thrilling qualifiers the sport has ever produced. Lewis Hamilton was already a two-time pole sitter by the time he arrived in Silverstone for his first ever home race in 2007. But taking P1 in front of his home crowd would mark the moment the rookie truly cemented his place in the affections of the British public. In front of a capacity crowd, Hamilton was on the back foot throughout qualifying, as McLaren teammate Fernando Alonso led the way in both Q1 and Q2, with Hamilton unable to get within 0.2 of the reigning champion, and with his first effort in Q3 good enough only for P4. But just like that other great British champion Nigel Mansell, Hamilton channeled the energy of the Silverstone fans for his final Q3 lap, pushing his McLaren car right to the edge of its performance envelope and occasionally just beyond it, coming from nowhere to snatch pole from Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen by over a tenth.
On board now with the British number one, trying to become the first Brit on pole for 11 years. Slightly awkward there through the fiddly corner as that car lost him some time. The pedal is flat to the floor. Hamilton goes for glory. Is it pole? Yes! Yes! He's done it! Lewis Hamilton sticks it on pole. Listen to the crowd.
Hamilton had done it, and the delight in his reaction, the reaction of his father Anthony, and the response from the exuberant British crowd was clear.
P1, Lewis, P1, fantastic, brilliant job, that's wonderful, superb.
And that is why the world is talking about Lewis Hamilton. Pure genius, it came from nowhere.
I think I really did quite a sweet job of putting the lap together in it. You know, I'm very, very fortunate to have done it, but couldn't have done it without the team changing the tyres quickly and get me out on time. So thank you to them. But I'm very excited about tomorrow now.
Hamilton has taken an incredible 8 pole positions at Melbourne's Albert Park, a record for a single venue that he shares with Ayrton Senna at Imola and Michael Schumacher at Suzuka. But it was arguably at the 2018 Australian Grand Prix where Hamilton shone the brightest on qualifying day. As Q3 arrived, all Mercedes' hopes of beating rivals Ferrari suddenly rested on Hamilton's shoulders after his teammate Valtteri Bottas put his car in the wall at the exit of Turn 2. But if the watching Mercedes management had been worried, they needn't have been. Hamilton already had provisional pole as he set off on his final flying lap around Albert Park. While in the first sector alone, he'd already improved on his previous best by 0.4. Fastest in every single sector, Hamilton's perfect mix of precision and aggression would ultimately give him pole from Kimi Raikkonen's Ferrari by a full 0.664 seconds.
Lewis Hamilton crosses the line. It's a 1:21.1. It's an all-time lap record. It's provisional pole for Lewis Hamilton.
It just smashed him. That was like a two-class qualifying session. Hamilton and the rest.
I'm so happy with that lap. It was such a nice lap. And you know, I'm always striving for perfection, so that was as close as I could get.
After the highs of winning his first world title in 2008, Hamilton and McLaren came back down to earth with a bump in 2009. With Red Bull on the rise and Brawn living out their fairy tale season, McLaren struggled throughout the year. But they developed the package, fitting it with the fashionable double diffuser, and by the end of the season, the MP424 had come good, with Hamilton taking 3 poles before the F1 circus arrived in Abu Dhabi for the first race at Yas Marina, where Hamilton rewarded the McLaren engineers' hard work with a scintillating pole lap. Right from the get-go, Hamilton was in imperious form, his fastest lap in Q1 a full half a second quicker than anyone else could manage. But the best was yet to come. Biding his time in Q3 as his rivals tilted for pole, eventually it was the turn of Hamilton. The McLaren driver's beautifully judged lap gave him his 4th pole position of the year by a staggering 0.667 seconds from the Red Bull of Sebastian Vettel. The reigning champion Hamilton quite simply in a league of his own under the floodlights.
It was quite of a smooth lap. It just kept getting better and better, and I'm very, very happy with it for sure.
There was a lot at stake when Hamilton took to the streets of Monte Carlo for qualifying in 2015. This was the town where his Mercedes teammate Nico Rosberg had grown up, and where 12 months earlier, Rosberg had claimed pole position in a way that had left Hamilton fuming.
So yellow, yellow, turn 5. Yellow, yellow, turn 5.
Yeah, that was very good of him.
And the tension between the pair at boiling point. It was also a race that Hamilton had never started on pole for, but Hamilton would put that right with a dominant performance. Rosberg headed Hamilton in both Q1 and Q2, but come Q3, it was hammer time. His first lap was good enough for provisional pole, but as the Mercedes pair began their final flying laps, it was Rosberg who blinked, locking up into Saint-Devote and leaving Hamilton clear to take his first Monaco pole, over 3/10 clear of his teammate.
Did I get it?
Yes, you did, pal.
I was really, really happy with it, and coming across the line, just hoping for once that you got it. So no, this is incredibly special for me and for my guys who have worked so hard this weekend. So I'm very, very happy.
You know you've driven a special lap if it leaves you shaking, and Hamilton's visceral reaction to his stunning 6th pole position at Silverstone spoke volumes about the commitment it had required. Ferrari's Sebastian Vettel was a fierce title rival and laid down the gauntlet in the first part of Q3, and it was clearly going to take a big final lap from Hamilton to defeat him. Hamilton's first sector was good, but then the cameras picked up the Mercedes darting through the Maggots-Beckett's complex at a speed that seemed scarcely believable. Hamilton's W09 looking more like a low-flying fighter jet than a Formula One car. As Hamilton crossed the line, the crowd erupted as their hero's name shot to the top of the timesheets.
Hamilton crosses the line. Hamilton is back on pole position. They love that in the grandstands.
Both Vettel and teammate Kimi Räikkönen tried, but ultimately failed to match the Mercedes driver's wonder lap.
And gets the cheer now from those that inspired him and gave him that extra 10th that he might just have needed.
While an emotional Hamilton was left physically and mentally drained by the effort.
You're shaking with emotion, literally.
Oh man, I gave it everything I could, and I was just praying that I could do it for you guys, and I'm so grateful for the support, because without you guys I wouldn't be able to do it.
The Hungaroring has always been one of Hamilton's happiest hunting grounds, and in 2012, his final season with McLaren, Hamilton secured pole position for the Hungarian Grand Prix with a blistering lap. Under a baking sun and with track temperatures up at 45 degrees Celsius, Hamilton set off for a wild ride on his final flying lap in Q3. With the Mercedes V8 of his McLaren MP4 27 howling, Hamilton held the car right on the ragged edge around the 4.3-kilometre track, eventually crossing the line with a lap that was over 4/10 faster than his nearest rival. The third of Hamilton's 7 pole positions at the track had been an utterly dominant one.
Okay, Liz, you're on pole by 4/10. 4/10 to Grosjean, nearly half a second to Vettel.
With Hamilton also securing McLaren's 150th pole position for good measure. Lewis Hamilton's 68th pole position at the 2017 Belgian Grand Prix saw him equal the record of the great Michael Schumacher. His record-breaking 69th would follow just one race later at Monza, and it was an effort that Schumacher would certainly have approved of. As the first rains to hit Monza in over a month fell on qualifying day, daunting conditions awaited the drivers as the session got underway, Romain Grosjean losing control of his Haas while driving down the start-finish straight. With rain falling again in Q3, the Red Bulls of Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo put in quick laps to head the timesheets, although both were driving with grid penalties hanging over their heads. But then, out of the gloom, Hamilton wrestled his twitching Mercedes through the parabolica and streaked down the main straight, crossing the line a full second faster than his rivals to snatch the ultimate record for the most pole positions in F1 history in an emphatic fashion, to the delight of both Hamilton and his team.
To do this here in such a historic circuit, a beautiful country, I'm going to have some pasta tonight to celebrate.
Hamilton had never driven the circuit Gilles Villeneuve when he arrived at Montreal in 2007, for what was only the 6th race of his F1 career. His McLaren teammate Fernando Alonso, meanwhile, had dominated the previous year's Canadian Grand Prix, taking pole position and the race win for Renault, and Hamilton was happy to play understudy across Friday practice as he got up to speed. Free practice 3, however, saw Hamilton up his game as he led his first session of the weekend, while qualifying would come down to a straight fight between the McLaren drivers, with reigning Alonso keen to stamp his authority on the team, while Hamilton was still on the hunt for his first pole position and race win. In Q2, the difference between the two drivers was just 0.036 seconds in Hamilton's favour, but it was Alonso who missed a beat in Q3, running wide at turn 10 and allowing Hamilton to sweep to a majestic maiden pole position by a commanding 0.456 seconds.
Well done, that's P1. You've done it, well done, mate. Fernando P2, Heidfeld, then Raikkonen.
Good job, guys. Great job.
You 4 tenths ahead of Alonso, and that was all in the last sector. I think he had a bit of a mistake, but it was a top lap, well done.
Hamilton's first Formula One victory would follow just 24 hours later, with Hamilton sensibly choosing to avoid his teammates' post-qualifying advice.
Don't be too aggressive in the first corner and let me go through.
Lewis Hamilton's prowess in the wet has been obvious since the very start of his career. But while his win in the treacherous 2008 British Grand Prix is held up by many as one of the great wet weather drives, his qualifying performance at the 2020 Styrian Grand Prix was every bit as remarkable. Torrential rain in the Styrian Alps had caused stewards to cancel final practice on Saturday morning, and conditions had only marginally improved as the afternoon's qualifying session got going. With drivers struggling for traction as they splashed around the Red Bull Ring, the battle for pole position came down to a straight fight between Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Hamilton's first Q3 lap was good enough to give him provisional pole by over 7 tenths from his Dutch rival. But as Verstappen chased down that time on his final run, he dramatically spun out of contention after coming upon the slow-moving Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel. In foul conditions and with his main rival sidelined, Hamilton could have cruised on his own final lap. But instead, he lit up the timing screens, setting a string of purple sectors and crossing the line, having beaten his own provisional pole by over 4 tenths, and ultimately stopping the clocks a full 1.216 seconds faster than the rest of the field, with a superhuman effort.
Hamilton is on pole. Can he go any faster? He's had 2 poles at the Red Bull Ring before. Make that 3 now. 2020 Styrian Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton on pole position.
What a fantastic session, mate. Awesome work, awesome work.
That was awesome, guys. Mega job. Great job, Bono.
At Singapore's Marina Bay Street Circuit in 2018, Hamilton produced a lap for pole position that stands at the top of the greatest qualifying performances ever seen in Formula One. And no one was more surprised to have pulled it off than Hamilton himself. Mercedes were on the back foot coming into the weekend, their W09's balance seemingly at odds with the street track's tight and twisty nature. A bold decision in Q1 by Mercedes to run Hamilton on the slower, ultra-soft tyres nearly spelled disaster as the track rubbered in and the pace of Hamilton's rivals increased. Hamilton coming within 3 tenths of an embarrassing Q1 exit. Once safely through to Q3 though, Hamilton would produce a lap for the ages that left his rivals reeling. On his first flying effort, Hamilton lapped the Singapore track over 1.3 seconds quicker than he'd managed all weekend, and over 3 seconds faster than Sebastian Vettel's pole time from the year before. One after the other, his rivals Raikkonen, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Bottas and title contender Vettel all tried their hardest, and while a second lap from Hamilton was aborted midway, he had done enough to secure a shock pole. his spine-tingling first effort leaving both him and the watching public utterly spellbound.
Nobody could beat Lewis Hamilton's time for the 200th time in Formula One. An English driver takes pole position, and Lewis Hamilton for a fourth time and a fourth record equaling time takes pole here in Singapore.
It's difficult to ever say if it's your best one or not, but that one felt the most complete lap that I think I may have ever done.